joining us for tonight's show. My name is Keiko Agena, and I am one of the new members of Impro Theater Main Company. Now, we recognize the immense challenges that artists and theater companies are still facing in the light of the pandemic. In our mission to spread joy, Impro has been active throughout the pandemic. In addition to our classes going online, we have presented over 350 live streamed shows for free. So I'm here, you guessed it, to ask for your support in our mission. Now, when you support Impro, you are helping us to offset those costs, to expand our programming, to strengthen our community, and to spread joy. And you're not only helping the performances, you're also helping the school, which is a vital, safe, welcoming place for artists of all levels and backgrounds. And we've made it very easy to make a donation. Just go to improtheater.com, click the donate button, or you can go to, you can text it from your phone, text Impro to 44321. That's 44321, text Impro. And we are a nonprofit organization, so it's completely tax deductible. Well, thank you very much for listening to this pitch and for making a donation. And please enjoy the show.
Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization. In Los Angeles, we pay our respect to the Gabrielina Tongva peoples. Impro Theater supports the promotion of an anti-racist world, where we recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion as central to our values. We are listening, learning, and growing. We invite you to join us in taking action wherever we can to create a more just world.
So here we go. There's the recording lady. Hey everybody, welcome back to Impro Talk. I'm Mike Rock, your host, and I'm very excited to announce a couple of things before our guests join us. Yeah, I said guests, multiple guests today to talk about Jane Austen. But first, Intro to Narrative online starts on March 12th. That's on Saturdays with Lisa Fredrickson. And you can be anywhere in the world. And as long as you have the internet, you can do Intro to Narrative online with Lisa Fredrickson. You can email school@improtheater.com to get more info about that, or go to improtheater.com. And this class is perfect for students who are brand new to improvisation or students with only a little improv experience. Lisa is wonderful, and she'll tell you all about the little flying improv fairies that are all around us when we're improvising, and probably when we're not improvising. Coming up, another edition of Sonder tonight at 8, and then one last performance for this run tomorrow at noon. Sonder is improvised storytelling, and this is a live run. It's done live before your very ears, and then in a few months' time, you'll be able to hear the sweetened, edited versions on the Sonder, the Improvised podcast version. Coming up, in Los Angeles, if you are within driving distance or walking distance of Los Angeles, Jane Austen Unscripted, presented by the Impro Theater Company at the Gary Marshall Theater in the Gary Marshall, in the garden, the delightful garden. Coming up April 16th to May 8th on the outdoor stage. Very exciting, an afternoon of tea and improv. But first, please join us to talk with the Jane team, Sarah Montroy Pepka, Paul Rogan, and Dan O'Connor, who are here with us to talk about this run. Welcome.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you.
You have every right to talk about this yourself, being a gentleman of Jane Austen.
Thank you. So first of all, let me say that if people want to get tickets, is the best place for tickets is garymarshalltheater.org. Am I right about that? Is that the best place to get tickets?
Yes.
We'll put that up as a subtitle. The team from Jane Austen Unscripted, from Impro Theater at the Gary Marshall Theater, are here to talk about the production. First, a little bit about each of you before for the uninitiated, for someone tuning in who hasn't met you, doesn't know about you. Sarah, you come to improv via Seattle, I believe, Seattle Theater Sports. Am I right about that?
That's right. I was in the company at Unexpected Productions for 5 years, which is also Seattle Theater Sports is the flagship show of Unexpected Productions. And if there's a few Impro company members who originally hailed from that area. So that feels like a nice like sister company in many ways when I moved to Los Angeles. And I've been in the Impro community for 7 years now. I'm a new member of the company, and this will be my third time doing Jane Austen performed with Impro. But I have been reading Jane Austen since about the 5th grade. So she's been with me for about 30 years.
And you also do lots of legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate theater, scripted theater, and Shakespeare. Are you in a show right now?
At this moment, I am not in a show. I am. I do have my next show coming up. I'll be working at the Great River Shakespeare Festival this summer, doing Taming of the Shrew with my buddy Lisa Volpe, who I've accidentally tried to put on Threads when I'm trying to email Lisa Fredrickson. And Twelfth Night as well. So I'll be doing that in a few months. I'll actually be the final weekend of Jane Austen Unscripted. I will be in the car driving to Minnesota to start that job.
It's in Minnesota. Wow, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
It'll probably still be snowing there. And Dan, tell us about your origin story.
My origin story with Jane, Mike?
Or just no, your origin story as a performer, writer, director, improviser.
Well, I'm the founder, one of the founders of Impro Theater and LA Theater Sports and Bay Area Theater Sports. So I've been improvising for a long time, almost as long as Sarah's been alive, which is kind of hysterical. Yeah, I'm an actor, I'm a director, and for this run, I'm co-producing with Sarah. But Paul and I have known each other as improvisers in the improv global community for a long time. We met in the 90s. And when Paul moved to town, one of the things we instantly talked about, and Paul was interested in doing, was improvise Jane Austen, which I was, so excited about and continue to be so excited about. And so Paul and I have directed a number of productions of it. And every time that we come back to do it, I'm excited as a creator, and I'm excited as an actor in it, because it is such a wonderful world. And I think one of the things that Paul said early on that really excited me, he goes, "This is not about the men." And so much of improv, especially back in the day, was guys, being heroes, and very, it wouldn't, the 80s would not have passed the Bechdel test in any way, shape, or form. And
yeah.
And so I was fascinated from the standpoint about, like, one of the things as directors we talked about a long time ago was there should never be a scene where there's just men on stage. And if there was a moment, I know I'm digressing from my introduction. I'm sorry, Mike. I'm just so excited, and I've also had 2 cups of coffee.
Two. My goodness.
So anyway, I'm very excited about the production, and I'm looking forward to being in it and to co-produce with Sarah and help Paul and Sarah and our terrific cast, some of whom have done the show before and some of whom haven't. So that's a long-winded introduction. I'm sorry.
Paul, being the only Englishman here in this conversation, you seem to be the preeminent authority on all things Jane Austen and Regency England.
No, I think the preeminent authority on all things Austen is the only person who's not a gentleman here amongst us. But I have done my very best to learn whatever I can, as has Dan, to try and kind of bring kind of credibility and authority to the texture of the world of Jane. My origin story, is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Is very similar. Doing lots and lots of improv for many years in London, working with lots of terrific people. I did the Eddie Izzard theatre run, Eddie Izzard and Friends. Back in the day, Comedy Store Players. Met Dan doing theatre sports in London. He was a frequent visitor and teacher. So coming to LA, which was my American wife wanted to come home, and Dan being so gracious to say yes, sure, let's do this Jane Austen thing. And before I was any part of the company at all. And him being just brave and gracious and saying yes, come and do it. And then we did it, and it was lovely and successful. And then it stopped, and then I went back to my normal life, and I wasn't part of Impro Theatre, and Impro Theatre did a different show, I think, Sondheim, and I thought it'd be nice to be part of Impro Theatre, wouldn't it? and then they did some more, and then there was a vote apparently, and somebody said, Paul, would you like to be part of Impro Theatre? And I said, yes, please. Thank you very much. And so that was that. And now, yes. So now, and me and Dan have done this all along, and now we're doing it with Sarah instead. And Sarah is a brilliant exponent of Austen, knows the language inside and out, extraordinarily good at the characters. And so here we are with an adjustment and some new insight and a fabulous outdoor space to perform the show in. So we're all very excited indeed.
Sarah, do you feel like you've been sort of champing at the bit to be in a directorial position with Jane after having done it, and having been reading it since you were just small?
When Paul and Dan called me, I was utterly surprised being asked to come on as a director. I don't presume to take on genres that other people have created. Nor do I anticipate that event happening. But of the genres at Impro, if you were to ask me which ones would you like to direct, which ones you'd like to teach, there's two that are such easy answers for me, and Jane is one of them. And I am excited to, as Paul mentioned, I'm a woman, to be bringing.
Explain that. It's good to explain that. Get it out there so that we can all make the adjustment.
Just gonna have to let people think through that. I am excited to have a woman's perspective leading this genre, and what a woman's perspective is, I don't know. It's my perspective. I actually don't speak on behalf of all women, but I'm excited for my woman's perspective to be jumping in and joining. And I do think that these two lads have done a wonderful job with this show, and I wouldn't be excited to do it if they hadn't done such a great job creating a space for women to shine.
Speaking of that, as Dan mentioned earlier, the sort of the tradition of improv for years was just it was a fraternity of it was dudes cracking wise on stage and out funnying one another.
I think we're very lucky. I mean, this company, even when it was LA Theater Sports, because the company started in 1988, and there's so many. I mean, we have always been gender equal. And in fact, we had a visiting teacher say, "Well, I'm sure you have issues with women not getting enough stage time," and we were all like, "No, we're very much 50-50 most of the time." And the co-founder of LA Theater Sports with me, Ellen Idelson, was a director and maker and terrific. So to answer your question, the men who were in the ensemble when Paul and I first did the very first production all were excited to jump into it, because it is such a joyful genre, and to be told, hey, it's not about you, it's about taking care of the threads of the woman's stories, was something that, you know, they're all really good actors. Those guys are all really good actors, and none of them were, you know, old school Barprov Neanderthals that couldn't, you know, give up space. So they were looking at it as actors. And in fact, the very first show, which had mediocre costumes in a big way and was upstairs in a little space in NoHo, was really thrilling. I'm sure the guys talked too much that first night, but it was about serving the traditional Austinian narratives. So I don't think it was an adjustment for our gentlemen. If anything, it was thrilling for everybody and thrilling to support.
Talk about that Austinian narrative style, source material. She has precious few full-length novels as source material. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you can hang your hat on as an improviser?
Yes, I can answer that. And I also want to later loop back to the question you asked Dan, because I have a thought on that as well.
Oh,
let me answer this. Ask me later about being a woman performing improv. So Jane exclusively writes from a woman's perspective, and you see inside the lead character's thoughts. And it's exquisite because one of the things that we sent out to the company as we were starting this rehearsal process was, please, for the love of God, read one of the books as opposed to watching one of the movies. Because a lot of people these days, in general, you know, if there's a movie to watch instead of a book, they'll shortcut and they'll watch the movie. But the thing that you miss when you watch a Jane Austen movie is you miss all of the internal dialogue and thinking and processing and rationalizing that these lead women are going through. And you also miss, so that's working, but also Jane as a character is actually working in all of these books, providing commentary between the dialogue as well. She points out every page has 2 to 3 moments where she points out the hypocrisy that's happening in what this character says versus what she does. And it's even sometimes just in a word or two where she gets this little wrench in there. And so what was the question? As far as like, you know, how this brings about women's stories, especially in a classical genre, you so rarely get the psychology of women. I do a lot of Shakespeare work, and one of the reasons Shakespeare is held up from his contemporaries is because his women have more psychology than like Ben Jonson, for example. It's still not enough. We still look at this and go, God, I wish there was more for women, but there's more than most of the contemporaries. And Jane at her time gave us something that we were really lacking, which was the complete internal workings of how these women were processing both relationships, love, attraction, friendships, all of that, as well as the dire financial straits that they existed in as far as what their outcome in life was linked to, which was marriage. And you get both of those in these books. And so you get really intelligent women dealing with life or death stakes, truly, while navigating this complex social system of how to act and how to behave and how to be. And if you don't read the book, you miss 90% of that. So for anybody who's watching this or planning to go see one of our shows and hasn't read some of our books, I really encourage you to pick it up because it's exquisite. And I can't think of another author like her, to be honest. I'm not a complete expert on all the authors in the world, but I can't think of an author, but Dorothy Parker, you know, could come similar to her in a later time, but she came hundreds of years later.
In Regency England at this period of time in the early 1800s, a woman would not inherit any of a family's money. The cards were stacked so desperately against women that you had to try to get married in order to eat and have a roof over your head. And not all and not all the families that Jane Austen includes in her books are super wealthy families either. So there is a breadth there. I want to offer. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I was just one thing off of what Sarah said, because I think it's important for people who are looking at this and haven't seen our show before. Because yes, it would be terrific if people knew who Austen was and read before they came to a show. But I really want to stress that you don't have to have read Austen to enjoy the show. Because one of the moments, and I think I shared this with Paul back in the day, we were doing Jane at the Pasadena Playhouse at the Carrie Hamilton, and some women brought their boyfriends along, and a couple of the guys were for lack of a better description, bros. They were kind of they weren't guys, and I'm generalizing, I realize, but they did not scream, "I read Jane Austen." They just wasn't part of their front-facing personality. But in the lobby afterwards, like, dude, that was amazing. Oh, so incredible. So they were enjoying the show from the standpoint of what the story was of that night. And I think that because often, especially when we do something like Chekhov, people are a little put off by the literary weight that they perceive they're going to have to digest. And the terrific thing about Austen is it is massively accessible. So I just wanted to add that little caffeinated bon mot, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking off my host hat for just 1 second and say that at Impro Theater Los Angeles, we're a theater company of storytellers. We do full-length plays that happen to be improvised and happen to be inspired by the works of great authors and great genres. We're not an historical recreation group. I tell classes what I teach. I say, you are not Jane Austen or whatever I'm teaching. You are not Tennessee Williams. So remove from your shoulders the responsibility for trying to recreate a Tennessee Williams play, because you're not going to do it, because you're not him.
And yet, the first time we heard that members of the Jane Austen Society of North America were going to be in our audience, and this was also in Pasadena, and we were all like, oh dear, they're going to catch us out, and we're going to be shown to have not done enough research. And somebody sitting behind these people afterwards reported that they were saying things like, oh, that moment in the second half, that was just like page 385 of Persuasion. And we've since been the entertainment for the Jane Austen Society of North America's annual national conference. So that is one of the most prideful things for us, is that we really, really love this writing. And she writes such beautiful and brilliant and funny stuff. Sarah's right, there's been nobody like her. Even now, there's nobody like her. The way she created this thing called indirect, what is it? Can you remember what it's called? Indirect reported speech, where the dipping into people's heads. And I mean, it came naturally to her, but she was inventing this entire literary style of being able to just dip into people's heads and communicate what they were thinking in a certain way. And it's funny and delightful. And that is what brought us to it in the first place. This notion that there was, I was sitting watching a run. There was every week Masterpiece was running Jane Austen's, and I was sitting going, why is nobody improvising this? This is amazing. All of these people are communicating through intelligence and wit and joy and love, and that's improvisers. And that led to the conversation with Dan of like, we really should be doing this, and it's just seemed blindingly obvious.
I should say, in defense of our verisimilitude in our runs, I've done one of those. I've done a couple of those Jane Austen Society of North America shows, and at the end of a show, someone at the intermission, Paul had said to me, sidled up to me and said, like, I think your guy might be a little too sharp. meaning harsh in his attitude. And I said, oh, okay, noted. And then at the end of the show, these two women in full Jane Austen regalia were, shaking hands and meeting cast members, and paused, and neither of them spoke for seconds, staring at me. And then one of them said, "We were worried about you." And and they were simultaneously worried about the character, but also me, the actor, being a little too arch in my. And then they said, "You made a fine recovery in the second act." I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So if the Jane Austen Society of North America folks give us their approbation, I think we're doing something right. But Sarah wanted to come back to bar prov and bro prov and being a woman amongst Neanderthal improvisers.
Yeah, just what Dan was talking about really made me recall the ways in which sexism internally has impacted me as an improviser over the years. And I remember it so clearly being up at Theater Sports in Seattle. And I was in my 20s, and I was, just a few years into my improvising career. But I remember when I was placed on teams with 3 men and myself, I would walk into those shows very confident because I would know what my role would be every single scene. It's going to be very clear if there was a wife, if there was a girlfriend, a mother, love interest, what have you. I knew it was going to be. And I would walk into shows where the team was 2 women or 3 women, and I would have an unsettled feeling of, how am I going to know where I fit in? And I say this as someone who was born and raised in Washington State, which is a very liberal state, and someone who was raised with an excessive amount of confidence by my parents. And, despite those 2 awesome setups, the sexism in the world around us was very clearly working itself in my brain. Now, it's also possible this wasn't entirely in my brain. This was also possibly a result of the way that my fellow improvisers, the male improvisers at that time, were thinking of roles as well. When they would, call for other characters, when they would create situations, it's possible they were creating pigeonholed situations. And it is slowly over, a decade and a half of doing this work that I have massaged those feelings of where do I fit into a show. And I love the way that those feelings have been very much massaged at Impro. And I do, even though, find that little voice of oppression against women does come into my head sometimes with Jane, when I go, okay, I'm not one of the 2 lead women. Okay, I have to fit in somehow. How am I going to feel? Okay. Am I going to be a mother? I better get in there and be a mother. Oh my God, am I going to be a rival? Is there room for a rival? There's that feeling of, where do I fit in? And I think it's a feeling I'm sure men do go through sometimes, but possibly not with the same regularity and consistency that women go through even at this time. And I am very lucky to have come into improvisation at a time where a lot of that sexism was already worked through, because as these guys pointed out, you can have bar prov where it's 8 men and 1 woman, and that was standard, and luckily those were not the communities I was part of. But it is still standard around the United States to have very unequal distribution of gender, and I'm grateful for the equal distribution in my communities, including Impro. That's what I wanted to say.
This run has a lot of firsts going for it. It will be the first outdoor run by Impro at the Gary Marshall, although we have done outdoor runs before. It'll be Sarah's first directorial show at the company level at Impro. It is the first live, not Zoom show for Impro in 3 years. 2 years, a little over 2 years, I think. And other things. Talk about the Jane team's approach to the various aspects of the show.
Yeah, the outdoors aspect is really fun because part of our concern and the reason that we haven't done many shows is that the wave of coronavirus kept extending and extending, and this was everybody's solution. I think a lot of LA theatre and all theatres are struggling and suffering, knowing when to time coming back into the live world, and performers don't want to be exposed to it either. So this is a nice opportunity for us and for audiences. The Gary Marshall has a lovely reputation. I think that, and also they are very excited by this. So they have a design team working on kind of very colourful outdoorsy costumes for us. There's going to be a string trio. I think the last count it was a trio playing live music. We may have some outdoor activities as well. So we're totally leveraging the outdoor. See how American I've become using the word leveraging. Leveraging the outdoorsiness of the whole thing.
What would it be? Leveraging?
The word doesn't exist in England except for when it's used as a quotation. So when British people use it, they say, "Well, of course, we're going to have to leverage that as So it's that
using the outdoors to best advantage.
Advantage, that's right, yes. Other examples of that linguistic thing are that when people have a router in their home, they call it a router. But if they work for a company that's Americanized, they use the word router because that's how it's pronounced. That's apropos of nothing.
Which novel is that in?
Yes, it's not in. There's a few things I want to pick up on actually. Just so many interesting things have been said. Two men talking hardly ever happens in Austin, really. But in our early days, two men would still go on stage and talk. And I had a revelation about that. I realized that the two men were talking because women weren't going on stage and interrupting them. So part of my new psychology is don't stand off the men, go and interrupt them because they're waiting for you to interrupt them. Otherwise, they'll just keep talking. But me and Dan made a rule of like, don't do that. It doesn't happen in Austin. It's just two men showing off and being funny. But there was a propensity to do, oh, look, there's two men from the town and they've come into the countryside and they're going to do 10 minutes of riffing now before somebody else appears. So I think that was just something that had to go. And the whole notion, it seemed radical at the time of saying, there's a show, and by the way, it's the women who are going to be prominent in this show. It's the women's stories they're going to feature. That seemed radical at the time.
It's still radical. It's still radical.
It's, I suppose, but it's important to us that one of our maxims is before romances happen, the audience needs to fall in love with the women and find out who they are and what they want and what their cares and concerns are. That's something myself and Sarah are working on to make that richer and deeper in this run, and to have that kind of sense of a full and developed world that love interests can enter, but only when it's a fully developed set of characters. So these are the kinds of approaches we're bringing to bear. That we're bringing to bear on a new run that we've got here.
Can I say something about that, Paul, really
yeah.
fast? About intelligent women, because Austin's characters are deeply intelligent. She has some also very silly characters, but she is deeply, deeply intelligent lead women. And I think this can be missed or overlooked sometimes by a non-discerning eye, because the women were given very few avenues through which to route their intelligence. And so as you're reading these books or watching the movie, whatever you're doing with Jane Austen, and you have these women who are primarily talking about taking walks and playing the piano and rearranging the room and going to a dance, it's very easy to think, oh, well, they're just very silly. And they are not. They are exquisitely intelligent people who have a range this big. And that's what Paul means by we're working on, one of my goals and one of his as well to really strengthen this show further is really digging into the expression of that intelligence, even if the topic to a contemporary woman feels trivial.
One of the things myself and Dan worked on very early is the notion of debating. Dan has an interesting way of describing the debating and how important it was for people just to sort of discussion, because that's all they had. Let's have a conversation. You men, you were lucky enough to go and get educated at Oxford, and we probably didn't have that. So let's have some. Let me show my intelligence. Let's engage. Let's take positions, and let's share our energy and see how much alike we are mentally, so that we can consider whether or not we suit each other. So that's another aspect of this as well. It's
and one thing, and I'm very excited to see what Sarah and Paul bring to it. I mean, every time we do it, it grows in one way or another. One thing for the audience, Mike, to understand, especially if they haven't seen the show before, or maybe they've seen it and haven't been around for a talk back. Because a number of people think there's some sort of set format that we follow, a recipe, and that's not the case. One of the things I think that we discovered early on, because I think in our first rehearsals, we kept improvising Pride and Prejudice over and over again. We realized that we needed to break it up, and one of the ways that I think the ensemble does a great job when they're performing it is that it's about every single relationship, and we hopefully give enough time so that we can understand what this woman wants and who she is, so that we can follow her. But it's all happening in those relationships, and it's all happening moment to moment. There's no sort of roadmap other than people's wants and how they're received in society. Oh, there was another point in there and now it's gone away. But the one thing that's interesting for us is this round is straight through. There's no interval. Normally, the cast will stand at the interval and announce who they're playing. So we make sure, because we don't know anything when it starts. We want to make sure that the names are correct. Usually we have a whiteboard on the side with the actors' names, and we'll write in when they get endowed as somebody so that people backstage know, oh, that is Eliza or whatever. But this round outdoors is much more sort of broken open, and there's no interval. It's like the train leaves the station, which is terrifying and thrilling at the same time, because there's no clarification. It's just what is in front of you. So my point being is that the moments between people where we learn about the characters and learn what they want and how they interact are that much more crucial and important, because that's all you have is the moment, which is thrilling to improvise.
Just to unpack a couple of things real quick, to someone who doesn't know Impro Theater LA, we improvise full-length plays, and some are in genre like Jane Austen and Shakespeare and Dorothy Parker, and some are sort of just a play. We do a show called Play Unscripted. And when we say we improvise it based on a genre, that doesn't mean that we lift character names and things like that. We make up on the spot the names of the places and the characters and the predicaments and situations. And therefore, while we're improvising a full-length play on our feet in front of an audience, we need to remember what we've named one another and who's uncle so-and-so and who's auntie so-and-so, and et cetera. And at an intermission on a 90-minute or 2-hour show, we would be able to look at each other and say, oh yeah, I think I'm playing Luke. No, you're John. And oh, I'm Marissa. No, you're Kathy. Oh yeah, that's right, etc. We won't be able to do that. Apparently, I'm just learning for the first time right now.
Yeah. To be honest, I thought we were having a little break. I thought we were having a 5
I didn't know we didn't have an intermission either. I thought it was the only one.
Okay. I'm
sorry to break the bad news to all three of you.
What else are we missing, Dan? What else do we know?
That should be the only thing.
I'm going to have a bullhorn, and I'm going to stand off to the side and say, no, you are Captain Johnson. And just we'll make those adjustments that way.
So the other thing to know is that Dan mentioned that when we do full-length plays, whether in according to a particular author or a genre. There is no template. There is no, oh, tonight's performance is going to follow the way the novel Sense and Sensibility unfolds or something like that. There is no template. I think the reason movies and TV adaptations can be a trap is because they rely primarily on the dialogue and actions described in the novels and don't necessarily mine quite as deeply the thoughts and inner life.
If I might say, one of the things that I want to really have us all explore, I know Sarah's on board with this, is and me and Dan have tried it, it's just the cast get very focused on being romantic interest, is the wonderful side characters that exist and their inner thoughts. There are Miss Bates in Emma, gets entire page monologues, just ramble and ramble and ramble. The notion that we could have a Miss Bates monologue, but not actually literally that character, but somebody who was so fully rounded and fully acted a member of the little village community that she came to life, or he came to life in such a way that they could have an entire monologue and just no function except just to be delightful, is so exciting to me. Just to clarify her world a little bit, it wasn't the world of the aristocracy at all. Her world was not aristocratic. Her world was what she called, in a letter to her niece, 3 or 4 families of the lower gentry living in the country. A story set around a small village community, not even a village, just the nice country houses of 3 or 4 families. And that limited number of people that you knew. And so how exciting it would be if people actually did come from London or Bath to stay in the area, new blood. And how marvelous that would be, because otherwise you simply wouldn't see people for months on end. And the once a month when there was a dance at the inn where people, it's the same people over and over again, but you got to dance and meet people and talk. And Dad got to play whist by the fire. That's the simple world these people lived in, and that's why, in a way, it's so delightful that we get to. That's why they've got such a rich inner life, because there's so much imagination, and they're reading and they put plays on for each other in the evening. And Jane Austen's early books are full of stories she invented. So it's that kind of delight. The word delight keeps coming back to me over and over again.
They don't put plays on in the evening at Sir Thomas's house, that's for sure. That's a Bedfield Park reference.
It's a what reference? I'm sorry.
To Mansfield Park Road.
I remember now. I did not remember the name, but I remember
there are no
the
plays. And if he finds out about the plays, he will be very angry.
What else? Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I wanted to say something off of what Sarah said about the women in the cast. Like she said, that, her experience is if she's not the A girl, which is our shorthand for the heroine. I think the men have the same problem, which is that if you are not vying for the lady, who are you and how do you find your way? And one of the ways we've addressed that is to just try and get people to not think in archetypes, but to think in the moment. So who am I that I'm here? Who would be here at this moment, rather than trying to enforce a character on a scene. And I think, especially when people first start improvising this, they will think in their mind, oh, I need to be the blank. Oh, we don't have a blank. And they'll try to impose a character on the scene. And really the best shows are when the narrative obviously needs a mysterious woman from London, or a dashing rich stranger, whatever it is. But the narrative, more times than not, will provide the next character. Serving the narrative is kind of what I think makes improv theater unique, in that it's about the story first and foremost, and not the individual actor feeding their ham. It's not about, because you don't know if you're going to be the hero woman or the hero guy, or or whether the whole night you may just come on and put somebody's coat on as a servant. You don't really know. And that sense of ensemble and, esprit de corps, as far as taking care of each other, is dictated by the story rather than by the individual's needs, which is, I think, very unique in improvisation, that there is a way to make space for each other and to take care of each other. And I think the audience appreciates that as well, that they can see the generosity going on stage.
I think too, sorry, Mike, now you're just going to be hearing like a tiny production meeting. What that makes me think of, Dan, is the lessons that we can take from Chekhov. Because in Chekhov, it is so much more of an ensemble playing space. It's less about the key A story and the key B story and all that. You've got this group of 8 characters who are all interconnected. I just finished reading Uncle Vanya, and you've got the nurse Marina and Waffles, the impoverished landowner who live on the estate. They are not the lead characters in this play, and yet at key moments in each act, they have this opportunity to shine and reflect off of the larger personalities at play and point out things that no other character could because of their perspective. And bringing in that ease and that value and that assumption that every character brings something, I think is such a great lesson for improvisers to learn and practice and feel and believe. Like, I'm not the lead character right now, but where is my Waffles character going to point out something about this lead character, this personality flaw she's got, and that's the thing that springboards her to the final. It's thinking in terms of ensemble, I think, is always more helpful than thinking in terms of who's lead and who's not, even though from a story perspective, we have to know for the audience's sake who's the lead.
Sarah, have you done live performing during the pandemic? Or I think you have.
I did a 5-month run of A Midsummer Night's Dream outdoors.
Yeah. So a lot of the cast of Jane Austen Unscripted, coming up at the Gary Marshall Theater April 16th to May 8th here in Los Angeles, haven't been doing live performing, and the first several rehearsals are actually Zoom rehearsals. I don't know how to make this into a question, but what are the three of you going to do to get the players ready for live in-person performing again?
Can I just say that I had spent 1.5 years not performing before I was cast in Midsummer, and I had nerves about how rusty this was going to feel. I got to the first day of rehearsal, and the instincts just turned on, and the joy turned on, and I did not need a ramp up. I know not everybody will be like that, but I think some people will be. They'll go, "Oh, here I am. This is what I was meant to do, and I'm back again."
To my mind, that there is an obvious pattern to this, because we do get a couple of weeks where we're in a live space at the theatre, and we can prepare theoretically in the first few weeks and go through what the world is like and go through certain elements that we would like people to consider. And in that final 2 weeks, it will be putting it all together, introducing the physical elements that we would love to do this time round. Sarah's a clown. She's a proper clown. Having that, being able to play with the outdoor space physically, make the whole thing take advantage of that outdoor space, and then ramp up the heat. Heat is very important between these characters. It's very hard to do on Zoom, but that's something we can bring to bear towards the end of the run as well. So I'm sure Sarah has her own little agenda. We haven't even had time to converse about these things really yet. So, but that's kind of where I was thinking.
Yeah, and I just wanted to yes and that with regards to Sarah coming on board, because I think the viewpoints, and for our listeners who don't know what viewpoints is, it's techniques developed by Anne Bogart with regards to the the architecture of the space, the architecture of the actors in relation to each other. It's much longer description, and I'm not doing it much service right now. But the idea of that heat, how do you create that heat outdoors? How do you relate to each other? How do you create intimate rooms in an outdoor space? And how do you then go back outside again? So it's very exciting, and there's a much, I think, more than anything, we need that physicality to be outside. It's actually going to be very helpful to have some good clown in the mix with this production because of being outdoors.
For someone who hasn't seen either Impro or another theater company improvise a full-length play, what are just some things that a person might look forward to if they're going to see when they think of improv, they think of whose line is it anyway? What are they going to see when you say, "Oh, we're going to go up on stage and improvise a full-length play"?
Well, they're part of it. It's the most unique experience in theater, because if you go to see Oklahoma on a Broadway stage, you're in an observing relationship to the production, and you may get caught up and you may get engaged. Not knocking Oklahoma, but with Impro theater and an entire narrative, an entire story being created in real time based on a suggestion from one of your numbers. Somebody from the audience gives us a suggestion to ignite the whole thing. You're a shareholder in a piece of theater. You are part of the piece of theater in a way. And I think that visceral experience, and I mean, it's the reason why people come back and see multiple performances in the same run, because it's never the same show. In fact, I would say to our viewers, if you think it's formatted in any way, go see 2 shows, and that you will be disabused of that rather quickly. So I think it's a great question, Mike, that the visceral feeling of watching a play being created in real time is really unique and special.
I think too, on top of that, something that you can expect is uplift, joy, feeling better when you leave the theater than when you entered the theater. Jane Austen's stories are full of hope and happiness, and we do try very hard to have our Jane Austen shows match her overall emotional trajectory. But then on top of that, as Dan's saying, because it's all being made up in front of you, you will be seeing the accidents. You will be seeing the moments where we go, oh, that just happened. Moving forward, so you get to see the raw goods, and I think the rawness is the most exciting part of watching improv.
And from my perspective, I think it's just the magic of seeing people work together as if they're one brain. It's just an absolutely unbelievable thing, even if you're a practitioner of it, to sit and watch. I've sat and watched shows by my own company just as an audience member and thought, this is absolutely amazing. It's as if they're one brain working together, a hive mind. It's really, really brilliant. Greater than the sum of its parts even.
Oh, and this experience is going to be a little bit more immersive than usual because as we said, we're not just outside. We're outside in a garden with, depending on which seat you choose, little garden tables with tea snacks. So, I mean, I actually hope people in the audience show up in costume, because I don't think there's going to be anything more Jane Austen-y immersive than sitting in a little garden watching this love story play out in front of you while you have your...
I'm not going to force anybody else in the cast to do this, but if people are in costume, I'm going to be out there milling amongst them before the show to the extent that I'm able to, playing with them and gossiping and trying to create the impression that they are also in this small village and something's just about to happen, because to me that's absolutely freaking delightful.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, can you, I know you haven't had a production meeting about this yet, but can you talk just the teeniest bit about incorporating clown training, clown work into
Yes.
this run?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a mime and a clown. And one of the first thoughts that I had when this question came up was that for me, clown particularly is about the tension between what you should be doing and what you are actually doing, what you should be feeling and what you are actually feeling, and the emotional drama that plays out in the clown to the delight of everyone else. And I think Jane is such a perfect setting for that, because Jane is full of shoulds. For example, just physically thinking about the characters in Jane, we have women. My Jane dress is so structured on top, it forces me to keep my shoulder. I actually have backache when I get done with the shows, because I am not used to having the proper spine and shoulder structure that, you know, these women were expected to have, right? So you have this necessity. But what happens when you need to escape from this gentleman who you don't want to see, you know? So you have this training that's keeping you upright, but you are trying so hard to get out of there, while this half is maintaining, you know, the properness, and this half is just trying to execute your feelings. I mean, that's just one little example of how the social tension of the era is rife for clown. Just rife. I can't wait. I hope that answers.
For people just listening, Sarah stepped up from her chair and did an elaborate escape from an unwanted gentleman bit, where her upper body stayed perfectly straight and balanced, and her lower body was going all Charlie Chaplin on us.
And see, to my mind, the delight of this is that even that is a dance, and that the gentleman himself, being a Mr. Collins type, possibly from Pride and Prejudice, is also doing a sort of, but if I may just because,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, oh my God, I just finished rereading the exchanges between Eleanor and Lucy Steele in Sense and Sensibility, where they are both completely aware that they are in love with the same gentleman, and one of them is engaged, but the other one has his affections. And can you imagine we'll do more demonstration. Can you imagine physicalizing, you know, these women who are maintaining this completely put together, proper, do not show any emotions, when, you know, even facially keeping things perfectly polite. My feelings are coming through, but I'm maintaining a perfect politeness. You know, like that I didn't need to stand up for that, but I got excited. We live in a time where expression is so much more allowed. We live in a time where women are allowed to just, you know, shove off men, get away from us. And so what Paul is saying of how do you politely maneuver yourself away from this man who won't get out of your way, my God, it's all clown. It's all clown.
You know, I'm just, this isn't a modest thing to say, but you're making me think, Sarah, one of the shows that we did, Paul, I don't know if you remember this, but I played the vicar, Mr. Browl, who is the most loud and just attacking, you know, Tracy Burns was the poor woman that I chased around the stage, following her to the tea card and things like that. But just, there is something about that, about bringing clown to these characters that feels so fantastic. And because touch was, you know, going back to the sort of viewpointsy part of it, because touch, Paul early on talked about the electric touch, which is that moment where, you know, maybe walking on a path that a woman might trip and the gentleman might grab her hand to support her, but that would be the first time that they've ever touched. And what I love about the genre, one of the things I love about the genre is that the smallest thing can be epic. Just touching someone's hand or just holding your gaze or having a dance with somebody can be earth-shatteringly important. And that's what, to a certain extent, that's what theater is. We are theatricalizing life. And here we have the genre where these small moments in life are then blown up exponentially with love and joy and terror and romance and the possibility of sex. All sorts of things are all packed down and dense in these very small moments.
For a person who's never read Jane or seen Impro do a full-length play of Jane, what would be your pitch to someone to go read a Jane book? And then what would be your second pitch to come and see our show?
Jane is funny. And our show is even funnier.
That's the fastest elevator pitch ever.
It is, and it's full of characters who are just straight out of now. As well, there's no kind of distancing, because Lizzie in Pride and Prejudice has a funny best friend. In Northanger Abbey, there's a boy racer who has a tricked out two-seater like a sports car but pulled by horses, lies about how long it takes him to get from one place to another, and has it customized. It's everything, nothing is new. And she's a really, really funny observer of people who are still with us today, because human nature hasn't changed at all, really. So come read the books because they're hilarious, and also come and see our show because I think we do a really lovely job of rendering that hilarity and creating very humane characters and lovely relationships.
And I would just yes and both Sarah and Paul. I would add that, like Sarah said earlier, there are mistakes. Part of the joy of improvisation is the mistakes, and some of the greatest storylines and epic comedy and joy has come out of mistakes. And so watching performers have to deal with these things in real time is it's delicious, it's joyful, and it's contagious, and yeah, I would say please come and please come and be part of the joy.
For those of you who are in Los Angeles, Jane Austen Unscripted from Impro Theater will be happening at the Gary Marshall Theater on the outdoor stage, April 16th to May 8th. Your tickets are available now, GaryMarshallTheater.org. That'll come up on the screen. And it's a very exciting first in-person run from Impro Theater in a couple of years, and a lot of other firsts. Co-directors Sarah Montroy-Pevka and Paul Rogan, thank you. Dan O'Connor, thank you for being here on Impro Talk to talk about this exciting run.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
See you next time, everybody. Thanks for joining us.